Thank you everybody for coming. Today our guest is Belisle Wulf. Her husband was Herbert Wulf. They've lived in the area. They lived until 1970. Tell me how long you lived here.
I was born here and baptized and went to school and confirmation, everything until I married Herb Wolf, and he worked for Northern States, and they moved him to the city, and then they moved him to Forest Lake, and we were there 20 years.
And then?
Then he retired and we came back here.
Her parents are William Belisle and Chloe
Chenard.
Her grandparents, I like this genealogy. So her grandparents were Sophie Tremblay, who married Paul Belisle, and her great-grandparents were Norbert and Angel Belisle. Now, I think we're just going to start. I'll let you begin. Betty Wolf.
Okay. My grandfather came to Minnesota when he was only 5 years old. And his first job was cleaning under washing machines, and he had to pick out all the lint. He got 50 cents a week, and he kept only 5 cents, and his father took the rest, and he would buy 3 cream puffs with the nickel. And he'd sit right on the bakery steps and eat them right away. And his second job, he worked in flour mills, and at 16, he bought 40 acres here in Wisconsin for $1 an acre. And then it took him 6 years to clear that land and to buy 2 horses, a cow, and some chickens. And then they moved on the land, they built a house, and there's a picture of the house over there on a table, and it now belongs to Francis Mondor. And I've got a picture of the house now, what it looks like now. Let's see now. And whenever they wanted to go to the city, they would drive with horse and buggy as far as Stillwater, and they had stables there where they put the horses overnight, and they'd take a, what do you call those things? Streetcar. They'd ride on the streetcar to Minneapolis, and it was usually an overnight trip to go visit. And my grandma, she did all her washing on a board until 1940, because they had some kind of engine that would work a wash machine, or you took a handle and you went back and forth, you know. And she didn't like the smell of the engine, so she wouldn't buy any. And she did her washing outside all summer long and hung it out. And then in the wintertime they would wash inside, but they still hung it out. And they'd have all that frozen stuff, but I don't think they washed sheets real often in those days. But, you know, and she had 11 children, so there was a lot of underwear and stuff to hang out. We had home remedies. Everybody didn't go to the doctor. They used a mustard plaster and mixed mustard with flour and water and put that on your chest, and it would burn like the dickens. And that's how they cured a cold. And my dad used that when he had pneumonia. He never went to the doctor. My dad never went to a doctor in his whole life until he had a stroke. Once he was using the thrashing machine, and a wire broke off and cut him up the back, and he had my mother sew him up and went back to work. He just didn't trust doctors. And then if babies were sick, they would cook barley, and they'd feed the babies the barley water, and that was nursing. They couldn't keep milk down, and so they drink that in their bottles. And if grown-ups were sick, we had ginger tea, and that was ginger and sugar and hot water, and it really works. If you have upset stomach, it works. And we use pine pitch to draw out slivers. If you had a sliver even under your nail, they'd put pine pitch on there overnight, and then the next morning the sliver would be sticking out. I still got pine pitch in my medicine cabinet. And they'd make a poultice whenever it was for boils and stuff like that. And either it was bread and milk or it was grated potatoes. And and even on boils. And they'd put that on overnight and it would draw everything out. And when you cut yourself, my dad would just put a bunch of flour on it and leave it for a day or so and stop the bleeding. That was that was what they used in those days. Now, when my mother was keeping house, we lived way out in the country, and that was not too far from Star Prairie. And we'd have Indians come to the door, and they would want to trade wild rice for bread. And she didn't really want to give up her homemade bread, but she didn't want to say no. So she would do it. And then they cooked the wild rice for breakfast, and they used that as breakfast food. They didn't know what else to do with it. And she had 2 stoves in the house to heat. And I remember that once my mother fainted and fell between the stoves. And on the walls had just the 2x4s. There wasn't any wallboard or anything. So it was really cold. Let's see what else. My dad would do trapping all winter, and he'd put the muskrat and all the skins on boards and hang them behind the stove to dry, so that smelled real sweet. And in the summer, he'd run a thrashing machine for my Uncle Theodore, and he did all different kinds of work so he wouldn't have a boss. He didn't like to have a boss. And we lived by a lake, and we had to take the water out of the lake to wash clothes, and my mother would strain it. And one day a turtle came out of the lake, and it had been killing the ducks. You'd see the ducks, and all of a sudden the one would go down under the water. And so she took the axe and hit the turtle with it, and the turtle just went right back into the lake with the axe in its back. And my dad was kind of peeved that she lost the axe. And we would have bleached flour sacks, and that's what we made our underwear with. And sometimes it'd say Pillsbury or something on your seat. And Somerset had Indian powwows. That was our entertainment. And they would come and they'd be at the ballpark and go through all their dancing and everything. And I don't remember, did they charge us money for that? I don't think there was any money involved.
No money in
They'd come from Long Lake. And sometimes we'd go up to Long Lake and watch them when they had their powwows. And then once there was a fire, that's when I was about 10 years old. And we didn't have a fire department at that time. And everybody came with a bucket. And once it was on top of a garage, and they had a ladder going up, and they were passing buckets of water from one hand to the other, all the way up the ladder and pouring the water on top of the garage. And that's how they put out fires. And everything was inflammable in those days. We had Christmas trees with candles on. They had little metal things and a little handle and a candle there, and you could fasten it onto the tree. And we had a movie hall that was upstairs over the grocery store, and the admission was 10 cents. And you'd have somebody playing the organ during the movie, and they real low when there's nothing going on. But when there was horses racing or something, the music would get real loud and fast. And that'd make it more exciting for us. I guess, there were stables for horses up by the church, and people came to church with a horse and buggy or a sleigh, and they would stable their horses in there during services. And then on Sundays, a lot of times we'd go to my grandfather's and we'd go right across the fields, and that was by Lemire's. And we could go on top of the snow. The snow would be that hard that the horses would go on top of the snow all the way across the fields. And we'd be sitting on straw and covered with a buffalo robe, another stinky thing. And it was, when it was really, really cold. Let's see, anything else? Oh, when Herb and I got married, our kitchen table had 3 holes in it where there was a slot machine attached. And it had come from my Uncle Theodore. And then for our cabinet, it was one that Father Baudet had disposed of because they had renovated the kitchen. And it was one of those old timers that had 2 bins that hold flour and sugar, and the top, there was a thing with a sifter in that your flour was in, and then the top was with glass doors, and that thing would be probably worth $1,000 now, but we didn't keep it. And then the cemetery had markers made out of wood. There was a lot of stone ones, but there were some made out of wood, and they'd have little doors in it where they had statues and things inside. And those eventually rotted away, so. That's about it.
I've got a question for you. What was Christmas like?
Well, a lot of the French people celebrated Christmas on New Year's. And that's when we'd go to Grandpa's and exchange gifts. We did it on Christmas Day.
And how many people would come? Was it the whole
Grandpa's?
family?
Everybody, and all their relatives in Minneapolis. And they'd stay overnight. And sometimes for 3 days.
And what did you do for presents?
Well, usually my aunts gave me things that they had when they were young. And we only got each one gift, or maybe we'd get a toboggan with a whole bunch. It'd be just one thing. Sometimes clothes.
And how about the other holidays? Was there something like, was there special Easter? Was there Thanksgiving?
Nothing special, but 4th of July was the biggest celebration. We'd celebrate for 3 days. Then afterwards, my brothers would go around town and find money and rings and all kinds of stuff. And you probably remember, maybe you were one of the boys. Because you'd be surprised, the rings and things they found, that watches, stuff that people had lost, had been bringing for 3 days.
So the Somerset itself had a celebration? A 4th of
Oh,
July
yeah, real big.
Every 4th of July.
Yeah.
And what happened? Were there bands? Was there a band?
Oh, yeah. We had parades.
And was there a community association that would come up with?
They'd have a carnival
Huh?
in later years. That was in a lot by Archie's. But
But I mean, I think at that time it was all the businessmen, all the business
they
people.
all went together
put
and
the
organized
program
it.
together.
They always had a group that organized everything.
What were your grandma and grandpa? What'd they look like? Tall, short, big?
They're on the table over there. They weren't very tall.
What do you remember about them?
Well, my grandma was always dressed up with long sleeves and high neck, and her hair pulled back real tight. I've got a picture of her in Broadway car, sitting in the front seat, back real straight, and that hairdo. And even when she was 50 years old, I thought she was a real old lady.
So, if you were going to come up with some adjectives, just a lonely word to describe them. A lonely word here and a lonely word there. What would you use?
Old-fashioned. And Grandpa would tell his boys they could have their fun, but not take their mistakes home. He was a fat man with bald spot, real jolly. He was a boss. And Grandma was real strict, and she raised, besides her kids, she raised 4 of her brother's children.
So all at the same time?
Yeah. And when anybody in the relatives in Minneapolis were sick, they'd always send them to the farm in Wisconsin. Well, and once there was Margaret, they sent her there for the summer, and she had tuberculosis. And she slept with my aunt Helen, so my aunt Helen got tuberculosis. In those days, there was a lot of TB.
And what did you do for TB? Did you do anything special?
They had to have their windows wide open, and even in the wintertime, or they slept in a tent in the yard.
In the wintertime too?
Well,
No.
I said the windows open.
Windows open.
And a lot of them went to sanitarium up by Superior. There was a few from Somerset too that had TB. And some of them recovered and some didn't.
Did you have some family members in any of the wars?
Well, my brothers,
Uh-huh.
2 of my brothers,
And which war?
let's see, Second World War, and they were in the Admiralty Islands. One brother was under fire for 17 days on a carrier with airplanes. And the other one, he worked in a kitchen, and he was the cook, and he came back with tuberculosis because he was in a real hot place. And he said when he'd be frying meat for the officers, he'd flap it over and there'd be a cockroach on the meat.
No, that's not good.
There's a question.
Where did you go to school?
St. Anne's in Somerset, and the high school here. And then I went to cooking things in the summertime when I worked as a cook for the schools. And I worked in the post office, I worked at the university. I never worked where I got Social Security, it was always on the government pension.
See another question.
When did you live in Somerset? You lived in Somerset until when did you?
I was born in 1916,
How long did you live?
and I lived in Somerset until 52. I'd go to the city and work in the summertime, a lot of times. And then I got a job here in the post office so that I stayed. And then my husband was moved by Northern States in 1956. So we moved to St. Paul, and from there we moved to Forest Lake. And we came back in 1977.
Betty, tell her what St. Anne's was like when you went to school.
Well, we had nuns, and we had lunch in the basement, and the toilets were all down there too. And
We had 3 floors, right?
yes, and the nuns lived upstairs at first.
Oh, did they?
They didn't have a sister's house, and then they built a sister's house.
Oh, okay.
And we had janitors there that would take care of everything, and a drinking fountain in the first hall. And we had a chapel in there where we had mass every morning in the school. And I'd go to school sometimes with one boot on and one boot off. If I was in a hurry.
How many in your class at St. Anne's?
Well, we never had one, we always had like 2 classes in a room. And I think there'd be maybe 16, something like that. I've got a picture of all of them, but I didn't bring that. I have to bring that to for the reunion at the sister school.
Did you wear a uniform?
No, no. We wore long stockings, long black stockings, or white, mostly black.
How many were in your high school class?
13 in my class.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Well, after that, there were a lot
The
more.
Germans, I think.
After my class, there was a lot more.
There's a question here.
What did he do? Like, when he was cleaning, he got 5 cents. What did he do?
He had to clean the lint under machines, washing machines, big ones. Probably was at a hotel where they did their own laundry.
What did you do to have fun?
What did you do for fun?
We had skis and sleds in the wintertime and skates. We'd go skating, and in summertime we went swimming all the time, all summer long. That's why I got all these spots on my face. I was in the sun too much.
What kind of chores did you do?
We hauled in wood to keep the fire burning. We pump water. We wash clothes. My mother was ill for 16 years. We did the cooking. We would make, like chocolate cake or spice cake, and then we'd use the bacon grease for we use a lot of spices so you wouldn't tell it was bacon grease.
What kind of chores would you do?
That's what I was talking about. And then we'd take the wash water after we got through washing. We'd scrub the front porch, and then we'd use the rest of the water and wash the outhouse. That was the last.
You didn't waste any water, did you?
Well, we had to haul it in with a pail.
Yeah, how far did you haul it?
Oh, we had a pump in the backyard.
Oh.
Yeah. We didn't have to haul it very far.
What kind of stuff did you use to keep warm with?
How did you keep warm?
Well, we had long underwear in those days, under the black stockings. And we walked to school. We didn't have any school buses.
You had earlier mentioned a buffalo hide.
Yeah.
Was that something that was traded into your family or something that was...
I don't know where my grandpa got that, but he had that buffalo hide, and whenever we went in the wintertime, we'd be covered with that in the slate.
Did it smell bad?
Yes.
And where did you put it in the summertime?
I don't know where he kept it.
Probably went
He probably hung it up in the shed or something.
for the air to fit.
Is the turtle still alive?
No, maybe that axe is still in the bottom of the lake.
How many years did you go to sea?
To St. Anne's, 8 years.
What kind of food did you have?
We had mostly food that we grew in the garden, or we bought meat from the grocery store, and you could get, like I said, a round steak for 25 cents. If you went to George Belisle's Cafe, you could get a whole dinner for 40 cents. And that was steak dinner. And they sold ice cream cones for a nickel.
Are you amazed on how much Somerset has changed?
Well, I have pictures on the table where Somerset in like 1926, and there's a big difference.
What lake was it that the accident
I don't know. All I know is it was between Star Prairie and Somerset, way out in the country, and it wasn't big enough to have a name even, I don't think.
When you walked into Somerset from where you lived, how far was that? When you came to school?
Oh, I live downtown then.
Oh, so you lived in, did you live in town during the week and then at home on the weekends, or how did that work? Or did you, your whole family lived in
Yeah.
town then? Oh.
Yeah, my dad had a grocery store in town here. And then after that, he had a garage. And the garage was right where the beauty shop is, right across it.
Betty, didn't you say there was a pharmacy at that time too?
Yeah, my father built our house on top of where the drugstore was. And in the back of our house, we had the shed that Dr. Fenniff kept the horses in. When he'd go treat people, he had to ride a horse and buggy. And our basement was full of stuff from the drugstore because my dad never cleaned it out. And we'd find bottles and things, and we wish now we kept the Lydia Pinkham bottles and all that stuff. That would have been antiques and worth money now.
What was your house in Somerset?
Well, first we lived way down where Zeno Harviews lived. That's where we moved when we first came here.
Is that down there towards where Bill Peck lived? Down
Yeah.
that way? Okay.
And we had like rats in the basement and snakes, and because we were right by the river and a farm. I think it was Oscar Germain's farm, and there was a lot of rats. And then we had to have little cans full of kerosene under the feet of the bed so bed bugs wouldn't get in the bed. You don't remember bed bugs, do you?
Yes, I do.
And we weren't too far from the river there.
But I remember going to your house, and I don't remember it being down there. Did you live in another one at
Yeah, my dad had built a grocery store down there across the street from Zeno's there.
Oh.
And then we moved up where Doc Fenniff's store had been,
Okay.
and his residence.
And that's on Main Street now?
Yeah, right next to that garage.
Okay.
Well, it's now a beauty shop.
Okay.
We got questions.
Is there a lot more hunting? Was there a lot more hunting back then than there is now?
Yeah, a lot of trapping.
How much was it to afford to get into a school?
Oh, you mean how much we had to pay?
Yeah.
I don't think we had to pay much. I think all we had to do was buy our books. Do you remember having to pay for school except for books? I don't remember.
Tuition, no.
Yeah, no tuition then. And it was all nuns we were teaching.
Do you speak French?
Not very good anymore, but I can understand it. But when I started school, I couldn't talk English.
Really?
Yeah. But we had French teachers then.
Oh, and was your instruction in English, or was it in French?
When we went to school? Well, they taught to us in French, but we had English classes, so we learned to talk English.
I have a question. You talked about pine pit. Is it pine pitch?
Mhm.
Can you explain? Because I don't know what that is. Is that like an ointment or something?
No, off of a pine tree, at a certain time of the year, there's pitch that comes out, and it's very, very sticky. You don't, if you get it on your car or your clothes, you have a heck of a time getting it off.
And you just put it
Right,
on the sliver,
yeah.
and then it just came out.
It did, it drew the sliver right off. My dad had I don't know what kind of a tumor you call it, but they're always just full of stuff. And he put pine pitch on it for 3 days and he got rid of it.
Then how do you get rid of the pine pitch?
I don't know how.
Dried up, didn't it?
Yeah, the one I have is dried up and I put it in the microwave to use it.
Scrape it off.
Yeah.
That pine pitch comes from, the best is from a white pine. And the way they get it, they cut a notch in the tree,
And then it leaks out.
and then it bleeds, then you pick it out.
That's the sap.
So if you need some in about 3 more years, I'm gonna cut about 10,000.
You can have a sale and everybody will buy a little.
I got it at home, I use it all the time.
I still got some that you gave me.
What kind of turtle was it?
I don't remember because I was about 5 years old.
How many sisters and brothers do you have?
I only have one sister living. I had 3 brothers, but I was the oldest in the family, and I'm 89.
Did you have pets, or were they all just the farm animals that hung around?
No, we always had a pet, mostly cats.
Did they come indoors?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. My dad had his dog, and my mother had her cat. And when they got, well, in recent times when they would watch the wrestling matches, they each had their animal on their lap, and they were...
Were you allergic to anything?
Yeah, strawberries. I would get a red rash from strawberries.
What kind of stores did they have back then than they do right now?
They had grocery stores, but the only thing different is that at the grocery store you could buy thread, material, all kinds of, sewing stuff, scissors, all that stuff.
You were also telling me people came in with like pails to buy stuff.
Yeah,
Like what would
Buy
they buy by
vinegar.
the pail for?
and sorghum that was like a molasses. They would bring their pails, and the stuff would be in barrels. And people would buy like 10 cents worth of crackers. They were going to have soup.
Did you have a favorite non-teacher?
Favorite what?
None. Favorite teacher.
Yes, I did. I had Sister Regina and Sister Joan of Arc.
Regina and Sister Joan of Arc.
Were the nuns strict?
Oh, yes.
If you weren't paying attention in school, did they hit you in the hand with a ruler?
Across their fingers.
That happened. My dad had that. They got hit like 2 times.
Did he get him?
Sister Regina and Sister Joan.
She just asked if your dad got hit.
Yeah, a ton of times.
Oh,
Got hit in the head like 11
but not on the head.
11 times a day.
Did you have children?
I have one daughter.
Did they have clothes for sale in stores, or did you have to make everything yourself?
I think everybody sewed or they had somebody sew for them. There were one lady in town, and she made mittens and caps and stuff like that for 25 cents a pair. And we'd go to her house to get them, and she smoked a pipe. And so she put her pipe under her aprons and hand us the stuff, and hear the smoke would be coming out.
Do you have any pets now?
No pets.
What was your favorite game back then to play?
Oh, we'd play, I think we called it Anthony Over. We'd go where there was a building, and we'd throw the ball over the building back and forth. And we did that over the stables by the school, where they used to keep the horses.
Did the ball ever get stuck on the roof?
Oh, the roof was real slanty.
Oh.
Just go over.
How old's your daughter?
She's 60 years old.
Did you get a driver's license when you were a kid?
No, my dad wouldn't let us drive the car, and he wouldn't take us in the car when he went anyplace, because he said if he was in an accident, then we would get hurt. It was just an excuse.
Yeah. How old were you when you had your daughter?
29 years old. And we had a Model T car, the kind that had curtains on the sides. And in the summertime, they'd remove the curtains. And my dad chewed snuff. So when we went someplace, he'd spit out the window and it'd come in the back seat.
What was your favorite game to play with your family, like family activities?
Well, the only thing I remember is Parcheesi. That's a board game, and with dice.
How old were you when you got married?
24.
How much was candy back then?
You can buy a candy bar for a nickel.
Were they just chocolate bars? Was it?
Well, something like what we have now, and they were little. But you could get a big chocolate bar for them. Cheap.
What was your daughter's name?
Jean. Now you thought of it, huh?
How old are you?
I'm 89 years old. Okay.
What was the most popular candy bar?
Oh, I don't remember the names. I knew they had a lot of penny candy. They'd have a showcase with all glass, and there's all this different candy, and everything was just a penny.
When the Depression was happening, how did that affect you?
Well, like I said, my table had 3 holes in it. My Uncle Theodore gave it to me, and we used the
So you were married during the Depression?
Yeah. And we lived in 2 rooms above the drugstore, and it had been a gypsy tea room. So one room was bright blue with yellow stars on the ceiling, and the other room was red and black. So we had to use a lot of paint to cover that.
Did you have a favorite football team?
Ball game?
Football team.
Football game? We didn't have football when we were young.
Oh.
When I was in high school, then they had football. And we had a team that went 4 years, won every game.
When you were young, was golf the most popular sport, or?
I don't remember even seeing golf clubs when I was young. I don't think anybody in Somerset played golf.
When did you get your first television?
When my husband had his surgery, he had brain surgery, and the people in town here bought him a TV. That was in 1952.
What? What year was your wedding in?
Pardon me?
What year was your wedding in?
I got married in 1940.
What was your favorite boxer, like, for your grandparents?
My favorite what?
Boxer, like, during...
You've been talking about James Braddock.
Oh,
So the Cinderella Man.
Oh,
And then
yeah,
through the
that was a
Depression
good
and things, so
movie.
that's why they're thinking about that. Is that what you're thinking about, Rita? Yeah.
yeah, I never kept track of boxers or anything like that.
What kind of sports were they back then?
They played baseball. I can remember that. What else did they play? I don't remember anything with baseball.
Softball or kickball.
Yeah,
Played back in my house.
yeah, in your backyard.
Olivia.
How?
Wait.
What was the football team's name?
What was your football team's name in high school?
I don't think they had any name. Somerset. See? I got pictures of the team.
How big were the schools when you were young?
Well, the sister school was 3 stories, but the nuns lived upstairs for quite a while, until they built the house. And the high school was 1 story.
Was it as big as this library, or smaller, or bigger?
No, about half the size of this. The sister school was bigger than the high school.
And how about your house? You said there were no sheetrock around. How many?
That was when I was a kid, when I was really young, before we moved to Somerset.
Was there an upstairs and a downstairs?
No, just a,
And a
it
roof
was like a
cellar?
shack,
Oh.
you know. The barn, in those days, they always built the barn better than the house.
I'm curious about, you said you lived upstairs in town in a former gypsy tea room.
Yeah, that was
What-
upstairs.
What does that mean?
The drugstore was downstairs, and they had 2 rooms up there that somebody had a gypsy tea room, and you could go up there and they'd read your tea leaves and get your fortune told. I don't remember who was running it.
Vic Vanessa?
Huh?
Vic Vanessa?
Maybe it was Vic Vanessa. I don't remember.
Eldest son.
But I don't think I ever went up there when they sold their tea and cookies and stuff. I was too young, yeah. No, because that's where I lived when I first got married.
Yeah, but there's the tea room.
Yeah,
You were too young then, weren't you?
yeah.
So was a tea room part of the time and a fortune telling place part of the time? Is that how it worked?
Those 2 rooms above the drugstore.
So during the day it was a tea room and at night it was a fortune telling, or did you?
No,
do
they
them
did
all?
the same. They read your tea leaves. You had to buy some tea and cookies and stuff.
Were those local folks who did that, or?
That's what we were talking about. I don't remember who it was. We got all kinds of hands here.
Were there any names of restaurants back then, like besides Pete's Pizza or?
The only thing I remember is George Belisle's Cafe. That's when you could buy an ice cream cone for a nickel and a steak dinner for 40 cents.
During the Great Depression, were you poor during the Great Depression?
We were poor, but everybody else was poor, so we didn't think anything of it.
Did you guys have power when you were a kid?
Oh, electricity. You wondered when you got electricity, I think.
Well, when we first moved to town, I know we had kerosene lamps. But when we moved to the other house, then we had power.
And telephones at the same time?
We had telephones. Party line where, everybody could listen to you.
And did you listen to them?
Oh, sure.
Did you play any sports at all, ever?
I played baseball. And I was skiing.
How long was the turtle herding the ducks?
Every day a duck would disappear, a baby duck would disappear.
Betty, at one time you lived down at the falls. Could you tell me who lived down there with you? Remember the family?
Mikey's, Lindbergh's, and, let's see.
Johnson's, isn't it?
The guy that ran the dam lived down there, Betty. I was trying to think of his name.
Chester's lived down there too.
Who?
Chester?
No.
Fennup, there's a Fennup down there. Okay.
Gunnar Johnson? Ralph Johnson?
I don't remember any Johnsons. I'm trying to think of the one that had the stove that used to eat all the donuts.
Oh, there was,
We called his wife Blackie.
There was a Pearson down there.
Oh, yeah,
Ben Pearson,
yeah.
he ran the dam, didn't he?
They had, well, they all worked shifts.
Yeah, but one of them was, I think, like the lead man or
They
the
had one.
foreman.
Berquist, that's, they were across the street from us. And Chris, Mrs. Chris, there was what, 5 houses down there? None now, they're all gone.
Tell them about the spring that was down there, come out the hill.
Well, we had it all piped into the house. We never could turn it off. And there was ice cold water. So my husband always had a bucket of minnows in the sink. With the water running in there. So he'd have them for fishing.
Would you use sticks and string to go fishing?
I didn't go fishing, but half of the population in Somerset went fishing. I think they just used a pole. What?
What did they use to wrap babies in when they were born?
Usually in little wool blankets. And they sometimes the boys and the girls had the same thing. They'd have long dresses. And they made out of flannel.
Did you have a favorite singer back then?
Singer?
Yeah.
I probably did, but I don't remember who it was.
Do you have a favorite singer now?
Not especially.
How did you hear music back then, or what was
I
music
had a
like?
phonograph that you cranked it up and it'd play records.
Where would you get the records from?
I don't know where they bought them. Probably the grocery store.
Did you have a favorite TV show or something?
We didn't have TV then.
In the 50s, when you and your husband got your TV, what kind of TV shows did you watch?
I don't remember.
Would you ever go fishing in the lake with the turtle?
No.
You said everybody went swimming. Can you tell us about the bathing attire? Did the boys and the girls all swim at the same time, or?
Sure, we all had bathing suits and they were kind of long and ugly.
And made out of flannel?
No, but I got pictures, but they're home. A bunch of us in our bathing suits, and they were all the same, all black and long leg things.
So you made them yourselves, and you all made them as the same?
No, I think they were purchased.
Last question from us, Aaron.
Did you have like a favorite radio program?
Radio?
Program. Did you have a favorite radio program?
I didn't so much. My brothers did. And my father, he listened to his programs. At first, when they got the radio, they'd say, there's got to be little people in there. Nobody would believe the noise was not man-made.
I think this has been wonderful. Thank you, everyone.